contraception is, I do not know whether it's an issue in your church or not. Some churches are against or says you cannot utilize contraception. Some churches is okay, you have no problem. Okay, so it depends on which tradition you're coming from. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to understand. And it affects each one of us because it affects whether we have children or not. And it also affects that how are we going to control not having children? Are we allowed to use methods? Okay, and these are some of the methods. Basically, there are two groups of methods to prevent contraception. Methods that prevent conception. That means the sperm entering the ovum. Okay. Coitus interruptus, rhythm methods, barrier, the pill, no plant sterilization. So these are some of the ways to prevent conception. But there are other ways that prevent implantation. That means this is what happens. You have sex, and then after that, you want to prevent the having if you have a fertilized egg, you want to prevent it from implanting. Because if you don't implant, the fertilized egg don't implant, then you will not get a child. So you have intrauterine devices. You have morning after pills that you can actually take that will make the uterine wall hostile so that there will not be implantation. Okay, so does your church have objection to preventing conception by these methods? And do your church have barriers or objection to methods that prevent implantation? So think about it. Think about it, and there's no easy answer, as the video clip from the Burman Institute says. Okay, but think about it and think about how your church is dealing with that. Okay, so does the Bible have anything to say about contraception? Okay, because Genesis chapter 1 verse 28 says, "Be fruitful and multiply." So does it mean that it's a command or is it a blessing? Okay, God bless them and says to them, "Be fruitful and multiply." Is it a command or a blessing? Because if it's a command, then you must go ahead and have as much children as you can. Because it's a command. That means prevention contraception is out. But if it's a blessing, now there's a choice. You can choose to receive the blessing or not. Then if it's a blessing, then contraception are allowed. So it's very important to see Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, whether it's a command or a blessing. Okay, so Liu Wen talked to say that it is not a command but a blessing. And if you read his book, he gives the theological background and the argument that it's not a command but it's a blessing, meaning that yes, we can use contraception. Okay, and he's going to say it's easy to confuse blessing and command. Okay, so you can look about that. And John Piper Baptist said that the Bible nowhere forbids birth control, either explicitly or implicitly. So we should not add universal rules that are not in Scripture. Okay, children are a gift from God. A wife is a gift from God. So it's a blessing rather than a command. Because if it's a command, then God must have take into consideration, because He's a sovereign God, you see, that there's a danger of overpopulation. That means if you don't practice contraception, that means we can be overpopulated because we keep on producing more and more children. Okay, so it's especially sin, you know, and then people argue about Onan. Okay, Onan was condemned because it's supposed to, by tradition, after the brother died, he has to go into the to the wife and make her pregnant, but he didn't want to, so he withdrew at the last moment and spilled his seed onto the ground, or what we call coitus interruptus. So he was punished for that. So was God angry with him because he did not produce a child? Or was God angry with him because he was disobedient? Okay, so we have to think about it. When we look at Bible, I have to look at it in context. And many of the bioethics issues, the Bible doesn't address it directly. So we have to look at it from a canonical view. That means we have to look for the whole counsel of the Bible, rather than just pick verses. And when we look at verses, we must look at it in context. And always look for the historical grammatical approach. Okay. And people who argue for that we have contraception, that you're not too large a family, overpopulation, limited resources, uneven distribution. All these are good arguments. Okay, but the most important argument is, what does God intend for human beings? And that's where stewardship comes in. It's where human love comes in. That's why when the inventor of the pills, okay, Dr. John Rock, is actually a devout Catholic, but he believed that we should be the use of the pill for birth control is actually doesn't contradict his belief as a Catholic. So the church tradition and contraception is that the church has always given a negative concept to sexuality than the Bible. Okay, Bible actually upholds sexuality as an important part, but the church tend to downgrade it. And the early days, the church actually restrict the attitude of woman and also sex. Sex have been only restricted, that we have Augustine to thank for that, as to produce children. Okay, so sex is for procreation, not recreation, not for pleasure. So sex must only be done to produce children. So that's the dispute between the church tradition. So when we come to the present time, okay, where our culture have changed, and our understanding of sexuality of men have changed. So we know that sex can be for procreation or recreation, and we have the means for contraception to prevent the expansion. We are not actually against producing people. We are not disobeying God, because we're taking it as a blessing to accept or not. We are not blindly producing children because God says, God didn't say that, but we imply that God says you cannot stop producing children. So I think most of our churches have no problem with contraception. So it's not an issue. So you're wondering, why is that? Why are you bringing it up? Well, it is that there are certain things about contraception that you must be aware of, especially when you later on when you graduate and you do marital counseling. Okay, marital counseling is counseling you do before people get married. Okay, so you talk about two shall be one, share, finance and looking after children, parenting. But I think all marital counseling should include sexuality, having sex, and whether what type of contraception you should use, especially when you talk about contraception. Okay, you find that these are the different type of contraception that is and their effectiveness. You find that no contraception, 15%. Okay, you can use condom, 85%. Okay, you use pill, it's about 92%, and implanted devices, okay, the IUDs is about 99. Of course, if you tie off the tubes, then it's almost 100%. So, which is acceptable. So, I just want to highlight, this is the intrauterine device. Okay, this is what they insert it into the uterus of a fertile female. Okay, but because it's a foreign body, in the sense that it irritates the uterine wall, thus making it hostile for any fertilized eggs to implant. Okay, so is there issue? I believe that it is, if you believe that life begins at conception. If life begins when the sperm fertilizes ovum, then by the 1 week, by the time the fertilized egg reach the uterus, is about 64 cells. So it's a marula, 64 cells. And you shall have an IUD, you're preventing the planting or the implantation onto the uterus. And if the fertilized egg does not implant, it will die. So if you believe that life begins at conception, that means you are killing the child. You're killing the fertilized egg. So usually when I do marital counseling, I bring this up and says, well, what do you think? Okay, you want to use this method, or maybe it's good to use contraceptive pills that controls when your eggs are released, rather than killing the fertilized egg or preventing the fertilized egg from going on to human beings.